Welcome, everybody, to the Pittsford Central School District Board of Education meeting. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have an approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
I see Irene and Ted. Any edits? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have two sets of minutes. We have the approval of the minutes from July 14th, the reorganization meeting. May I have a motion, please? I have Val and Renee. Any edits? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And an approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on July 14th. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I have Irene and Ted. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. It is time for public comment. Matt, I'm going to turn this over to you. Is anyone in the room?
Yep, at this point we have one person in the room, and it is Henry Baker. I'm going to let them into the room.
Okay.
Thank you for taking my question. I have two quick questions. The first was that a lot of us parents were very concerned about the stuff that came out yesterday from the Monroe County Teachers Union about, frankly, some very draconian attitudes toward testing. And this comes along with things that the other teachers union, the New York State United Teachers, have said about, for example, proposing that one positive test should result in a school being closed for 14 days and other kinds of really excessive attitudes toward testing and closing schools, which a lot of us parents and physicians like myself that know a little bit about the spread of the virus amongst kids and in school settings know that this is truly excessive. And we want to know what the school district is doing to take this into account in terms of how we plan to respond to positive tests, which is very highly possible that we will have at some point during the school year. The feeling with a lot of us is that this is a blatant attempt to simply sabotage school reopening, which is not evidence-based at all, and it's not what foreign countries have done. They've taken a much more measured approach to positive tests. And we're very concerned that this is the next step in a way to kind of thwart in-school reopening. And we want to know where the school stands on, district stands on this, and how you plan to look at this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Baker. Mike?
Thank you, Dr. Baker. So the first thing I would say is that I couldn't be more thankful and appreciative of all of our teachers to date. There is certainly a high level of anxiety, and that's just the reality. There's anxiety on sides of teachers and paraprofessionals and even administrators, even parents. And we were a minority district in that we did not approve the NYSET's vote on their resolution to close schools, which is significant.
Mm-hmm.
So our take on closing schools would be 100% aligned with what the Department of Health tells us to do, which is to begin with contact tracing,
Mm-hmm.
and then to see if it's consolidated to a pod of students, or if it's a mass infection, or if we need to isolate, or I think it's a very multi-pronged approach that, and as you know, no situation or scenario is the same. So there's so many variables that go into it. We would work immediately with the Department of Health. They have Dr. Brogan's cell phone number and my cell phone number, which is why we have felt that attendance every day, regardless if we're hybrid or in person, is critical, so that we can assist the Department of Health with contact tracing. And
Okay.
and that's where we stand at this moment. We're I think that the biggest thing here is that you have a very emotional cohort. It's not just teachers. It's parents and there's also people in the medical profession with varying opinions on this. None of us are doctors. None of us have been through a pandemic before. So we would rely on the best practices associated with the Department of Health to move us through this.
Okay. Well, that's reassuring. I appreciate that it's not a kind of that you'd resist a knee-jerk kind of response like that, because that is something that's, I think, whether it's being put out just as feelers to see if they can get traction with it or what. I'm glad to hear that's not the approach that the district is taking. So thank you. My only other question would be, could you just give a little more? It's something that has not been clear to a lot of parents, including myself. The concern about trying to get as much in-school time for the secondary level students as possible. Obviously, the district has done a pretty good job, and I applaud you on that for the elementary school students. But that's still obviously the secondary students are out of school a lot of the time. What can you give a more detailed explanation for the reason for the Wednesday situation where the Wednesdays are completely remote? There are at least 2 districts in the county that have gone with a full 50% attendance. It would be helpful to know really what is driving that Wednesday situation.
Sure, and anyone else feel free to chime in. But as we process through the different models, and recognizing that secondary is certainly different as far as movement, in particular, than elementary. So at the secondary level, we're going to have students switching classes, going to multiple classrooms. One of the reasons we thought this would be helpful was that we would be able to take a day during the middle of the week to do a pretty deep clean, disinfect the buildings. The second reason is that we would be able to use that Wednesday pretty creatively, which we feel could be as valuable as having a 50-50 split. So for example, one of the things I feel really bad for our kids is that they're going to be in class sizes of 10 to 12, for example. So let's just take the middle school, for example. They might be in a pod of 13, 14 kids for the whole day. We now have the ability to bring all of their classmates, let's say in a science classroom, together so they can see each other in a synchronous manner on a Wednesday. There's also the issue of being able to bring our elementary students in is taking a lot of additional staffing. And by even one day on a Wednesday, when our paraprofessionals, let's say, aren't in school, we can redeploy them to our elementary schools to provide some of the assistance that's needed for supervision, for dismissal, for arrival. So we've had to take a look at this. It's been fascinating for us. We've had to take a look at this from a K-12 perspective, with K-5 being a priority, and at the same time, given the limitations of the staff that's available to us, which is significant. We have a significant amount of staff. We wanted to provide equity 7-12, and we wanted to provide our kids an opportunity to connect with their teachers and their classes in a way that could be pretty creative. And the other thing I would say is that this is all evolving for us. I mean, we are poised right now to pivot at moment's notice. If we have to go to full remote while during hybrid, we're going to learn from mistakes we've made along the way. We may change things along the way, but I'll go back to the first question and connect it with the second one. In my career, and Melanie shared this today, our assistant superintendent of instruction, in her career, we've never seen a group of teachers more committed to professional development around synchronous learning and curriculum across the board, with spending almost all of their time over the summer working together in cohorts to make this the best opportunity for kids. I shared today at our administrative meeting that one of the things that we have to understand is that we've never lived through a pandemic before. We are doing our very best in a task that almost seems impossible, and I won't bore you with the details of why it seems to be impossible. But there's a lot that goes into this, and having the students home on Wednesday doesn't mean that they're home on Wednesday sleeping in. They're following their schedule, and they're going to be doing some pretty creative things.
Thank you for that response. I appreciate it. It sheds a little light onto it. I would still say that for my own view and the view of many parents I've spoken with, if it were to go the whole year, and I realize it may not, the Wednesday situation, even at 50%, constitutes 4 full weeks of in-school time that each student would lose. And that's a lot. And I think that with the data out there that in-school teaching is considered to be very valuable to students, I just think that I would hope that that would be taken into consideration very strongly. As you said, things may change in the future. I think that having the kids physically present, admittedly under these odd circumstances, but having them physically present is a priority for many, many parents. And I would just reiterate that and ask you to keep that in mind going forward. But I appreciate a bit more nuanced response as to why that decision was made. Thank you.
And I appreciate you calling in, Dr. Baker. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Baker. Matt, do we have anyone else waiting?
Yes, we have Jen Canning.
Okay.
Into the room.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, everybody. Thanks
Hi.
for having me tonight. I just wanted to check in about the district's equity and inclusion plan for this upcoming year. I know our focus has been on getting back into school, but I also know that we're very capable of doing multiple things at one time. So I wanted to know if we had heard anything from Generation Ready since we finished our work with them and weren't able to continue on, and what shape the code of conduct was in going into the school year, especially considering there's going to be online learning and that cyberbullying continues to be an issue and might be more of an issue with the online learning that our students are going to be doing.
Thanks, Jen. Mike?
Sure. So at the beginning of the year, we're in a mode right now of creating lists of things of what opening the school should look like for kids and for teachers. So you can imagine that. So just to give you the different layers of things, today we talked about how we still have to have fire drills, and we have to have drills, and we have to have them in the first 10 days of school. And how do you do that with social distancing? And then we want to keep the windows and doors open, but how do you do that with intruders? Our primary focus, as you get beyond those logistics, has been around building relationships with students and building a classroom environment that's important as that would be in school. So a lot of our teaching and learning, the first weeks of school, will be around the SEL stuff. Will be around helping each other instead of hurting each other, about appropriateness with social media. It'll be about how to log in to different accounts and how to use those accounts responsibly. So those are the types of things that we continue to work through as we have our teachers with us a few extra days before school, which is exactly why we've postponed the start of school until after Labor Day. We're going to have to focus on how to deal with PPE. What happens if a student doesn't wear a mask? How do we deal with students that are resistant to masks and mask breaks? And so a lot of it's going to be very, very much around how to handle the logistics around living through an unprecedented pandemic. Parallel to that, we continue our work with equity and inclusion. And I've shared this before, I'm not sure if it was with you, maybe, or others, that our summer typically is around building a strategic initiative around whatever the strategic initiative is. So this year, we have two pretty significant ones, which is to continue our work from last year and to build from that. In addition to, again, trying to open schools in a pretty impossible world right now. So we are, one of the criticisms that the district has received is that we should be doing more as a county, and Rochester is right down the road, and superintendents and boards of education should be doing more collectively. And so we're doing a lot more as a county right now to address equity and inclusion. Amy is the board president for Monroe County School Boards, and so she has a significant voice in bringing the boards of education together. We continue to meet 3 times, actually now we're down to 1 time a week just now, but 3 times a week, and we have 1 meeting allocated to equity and inclusion, including building curriculum that would be primarily for secondary level, actually 4, 8, and 12, which would involve our ASIs, with a starting point of looking at our history in Rochester around our story with regards to the riots in the 60s and moving back and then forward, and then how Rochester became Rochester. Real authentic and relevant way to have kids connect with where we are right now. We're working on things with students and with the board around a policy surrounding equity. As a county, we're, as you know, Generation Ready has collapsed because New York City was their primary audience in this area. And when schools closed and people's budgets were really tight, that left. So we're now doing a COSER with BOCES, with other districts, to see if we can continue our work with either Natalie or others. And so we're working with that. And internally, our assistant superintendent for instruction, working with the standards leaders, is also working on K-12 prompts and areas related to curriculum specific to social studies and English around how we can build in lessons that are embedded around equity and inclusion. We're also doing a lot more on the hiring side of town. I'm very happy with the amount of underrepresented races that we're hiring and have been hiring the last year, including this year, and using people within the IAC to assist with bringing people of color to our interview committees, which has been phenomenal. I couldn't be proud of the work that we're doing with equity and inclusion, and soon we'll be poised to share a plan with the community before the start of the school year.
Great. So it'll be posted to update the one that's on the website now, you said before
Yeah,
the school year?
that's right. Yeah. And normally it's so when you think about like our capacity, everything's important. When I say everything's important, and I had a meeting with parents and some administrators and teachers and the board president. And during that meeting, she talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and in the form of race. And right now we can't even start that or continue that conversation until we have schools open. But at the same time, we know that schools opening we're planned for it. We're running parallel meetings and strategic work around equity and inclusion. So they're both huge lifts. And I just have to say, I'm just so thankful for, everyone that's been involved in the work, and we've asked a ton of people to just literally not sleep this summer. And I know that's hard to explain or it's hard to justify, but I can't thank our administrators and our teachers enough, because there's people see the value and the importance, and there's so much on everyone's plate. The biggest thing that we can do is model what working together looks like, and create a real good plan to implement along the way. And that's our goal.
Great, thanks. I look forward to seeing that.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Matt?
Yep, we have one more. We have John Sussman.
Okay,
Bringing him in now.
thank you.
How are you? Thank you so much. I can't get my video to start, so.
That's okay, we can hear you.
I am so appreciative of the way the board has made its proceedings available via video conference, and I just want to commend you for doing that. It's especially these days. It's ensuring like access to our community. I had one item of feedback and one question, and I'll lead with the feedback. I think it would be wonderful if, or I would ask you to consider just doing a straight Zoom webinar for these meetings. It's a bit awkward to provide public comment when you have two different platforms going. And I think that others who have participated in the meetings would share that feedback with me. So just something to consider. The Ensemble platform is great, but it's been a little buggy for some of us. And the second one around access is just whether or not, I know that in March, the second public comment period was, I think was removed. And I suspect that had to do with just making sure that the business of the meetings could proceed and be recorded. I was wondering if you would consider restoring the second public comment during this time for those people who might not make it to this portion of the meeting. And finally, I just want to thank you so much once again for ensuring access in this way. And thank you so very much.
Thanks, John. We are actually talking in discussion about our public comment session. And what we're planning to do is bring the board back to the boardroom and still offer basically the Zoom setup as you have it right now. And we are talking about shifting our public comment session to the end of the meeting. So that way, those that do attend the meeting would have access to public comment toward the end. It also allows for an opportunity for many of the questions are answered in the agenda by the superintendent and through the superintendent's report. So we'd like to offer the public comment after that, so people would have the entire agenda that they've reviewed and heard, and then offer a time for them to ask any questions. if that makes sense. Hi, we see you now. I don't hear you though. You're on mute.
I think I had multiple Zoom meetings going on, if that tells you anything about my life. So, and my daughter just asked me in reference to you, board president, is that your manager? And I had to clarify.
No,
not my
I am
manager.
not. That's adorable.
Amy,
Mike-
if I could just add, just around
Sure.
the topic of access, which is connected with Jen Canning, our last person on public comment, that we spent a lot of our year-end funds last year on anticipating the need for technology going into this year. And we have our surveys that are out, and we know how many families need one-to-one devices and need Wi-Fi. And we're poised to make sure that every student has access, equal access to devices and to Wi-Fi. So that's one thing. And the second thing to John's question about, or his point around ensemble, we had a we're struggling finding the right platform for forums and board meetings, to be quite frank with you. What happened the last time that we tried with a forum, we had 1,760 people logged into us at the same time that West Irondequoit had a significant amount of people, and the same server was feeding the two districts. And we realized it didn't work. So for the forums that are coming up on Thursday, we're going with an outside contractor to make sure that parents' questions and staff questions can be asked and answered without interruption. And I'm knocking on wood right now. But I think that your points are very well taken, and we're trying to be as open and transparent and collaborative as possible. And I appreciate your feedback and your question, John.
Thanks, John. Matt, anyone else?
Amy, the waiting room is empty.
Okay. With that, we will close out public comment and move on to Board of Education reports. We finally have dates for our upcoming meetings, and to my knowledge, all of these meetings will be live at the DoubleTree, with the exception of our next board leadership meeting, which is actually tomorrow evening, and that will be a Zoom meeting. And the reason that's changed from board presidents to board leadership is this year, I've mentioned before, we are including board vice presidents as well as presidents from Monroe County because of the activity and what's happening with reopening and with the school year to come. So we felt that it was an opportunity to invite all of board leadership into those meetings. So that meeting will be tomorrow via Zoom. And all the other meetings are listed here. This year, it'll be vital for everybody to let Becky and Sherry know if you're going to be there on a regular basis. And they'll have the sheet, as they always do when you arrive, to say that you'll always be there. But it'll be more important this year for them to keep a track of who is coming and going. So I did submit our names of those that, and I don't know, Deb, if you did the same, but I submitted everyone's names who would be attending the various meetings. If anyone would like to attend a meeting, as always, please feel free to do so and just let Deb know, and then she'll sign you up for whatever meeting you have an interest in. I know that information exchange is going to be pretty fluid this year. I did submit, for those of you who did give me topics to submit to Becky, I did that this week. I think really what we're going to be looking at is reopening and a lot of talk around equity and inclusion. That is one of my personal goals for Monroe County School Boards this year. And that's something that we will be actively looking to find people to commit to professional development for all of the Monroe County School Boards. So that said, all of our dates are listed here. We do have a Communications Outreach Advisory Committee meeting on the 24th of August. We were able to secure that date, so I'm thrilled with that. And then other dates to remember, we have schools opening on the 8th of September, which we can all clap. We're very excited. And the 15th is our next regularly scheduled meeting. And as I mentioned during public comment, we're hopeful to have at least the board socially distanced in the boardroom, the McCluskey room, on the 15th. I will move on to the financial report. Darren.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the year-end transfer to reserve funds. If you recall, back in early June, you did the up to amounts as we do it each year. We told you at that time that we knew that that added up to something far in excess of what we expected for surplus. Matter of fact, in that document, we had estimated about 2.2% surplus. It looks like we finished the year more about 3.5%. A lot of that has to do with the COVID. In working with the attorneys and our auditors, and hearing the governor talking about 20% reduction of aid for this year, as well as the additional costs related to COVID, we tried to channel the money into reserves that would be more easily accessible to the board should you need them throughout the year. So that is why the things like the capital reserve fund was lighter, or the transfer is lighter than we usually have done in the past. That reserve balance is pretty hefty right now, or very healthy. So we are recommending the following reserves. I can go through them one by one if you want. The one new thing for this year is the comptroller and the governor allowed for a transfer of year-end surplus into food service programs to help them with the costs that they had without having the offsetting revenue throughout the year to do that. So and back in May, we estimated $300,000, and we're asking to transfer $277,000 into the food service fund.
Thanks, Darren.
Mhm.
May I have a motion to approve the year-end transfer?
So moved.
Thanks, Ted and Val. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Next, going on with the year end, as well as for PPE, or the personal protective equipment related to COVID. We are on a trajectory, if we were to use the guidance from the state as far as the types of things that we should be buying and the quantities to get us through 12 weeks, we're on a trajectory to be right around $1.5 to maybe $2 million of costs. There's very little funds out there to help offset that. So after meeting with the auditors, we are recommending that we use $750,000 of the unexpended or unappropriated fund balance and appropriate that and amend the budget up for 2021 for that $750,000. There's no tax impact to the tax levy or to the taxpayers. It's basically just taking money from the savings account and setting it aside for this purpose.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please?
Moved.
I have Renee and Irene. Any questions?
Darren, what impact does this quote unquote increase have downstream for subsequent year budgets and those impacts?
The way we went about it, because if we had waited and did this as part of once we're into the 2021 year, what you'd be doing is you'd be reducing what you have in fund balance. By doing it with the year-end surplus, the fund balance is still at that 4% cap, but we decreased the amount of money we had available to put into reserves, so to speak. So if we don't need these funds, then you'd have that in year-end surplus for 2021, and you'd have flexibility to do other things with that. If we didn't do this, which is what a lot of schools are talking about right now, they're spending a lot of money on PPE, and they're having to talk about cutting programs, and especially if the state aid is reduced. So we're trying to stave off those measures as long as we possibly can.
If I could just add, Darren, I want to thank you and the business office for the foresight, because we had questions that we took from community members last year as we were proposing our budget, wanting to know exactly where the PPE or the COVID funding was going to. And we weren't able to articulate that to the dollar because of so many uncertainties and variables. And now we're at a point where we get clarifying guidance and better understanding our community needs that we're able to use last year's funds without hurting or decimating this year's budget and program. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Next item is that we do every year this time of year is the tax warrant. It was a very confusing year because of the COVID. Late in the spring, when the assessors are normally updating the assessments, they were told basically to leave the assessments where they are. So there's not the assessment growth, but the state changed the equalization rates anyway. So there's some very strange ups and downs from one town to the next. But when you look at it overall, when we call the composite rate, it actually went up 45 cents or 0.16%. I will caution people that does not necessarily mean that's what your tax bill will do. It depends on what happens with your individual assessment.
Okay, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Ted. And I, Val. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, just quickly, Darren, was Brighton one of the towns that put its reassessment on hold?
Yes, they all did.
They all did? Okay.
But the hard part is the equalization rates changed as though they had gone to full value. So we'll probably see some strange things happen next year too, even if they correct it.
I can imagine.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I promise there is an end in sight.
Good day.
Going on with the tax theme, tax certiorari proceeding, and also in the theme of reserves, if you will. We finally settled on 3 properties. The tax certiorari has been going on for 2 years. Rather than expending from the budget, something unanticipated, we are requesting to use from the tax certiorari return $67,000 to settle these claims.
May I have a motion to approve the tax certiorari, please? I have Irene and Renee. Any questions?
Yeah, Darren, any sense whether Brighton will be conducting their assessment?
I'm sorry?
Do we anticipate, I noticed that these properties are in Brighton.
Mhm.
Any sense that they'll be conducting their assessment next year?
They will be doing a reassessment. However, based on this settlement, there's a 3-year stipulation of what their assessments will be.
So that represents like a 30% discrepancy between what they were taxed or the property valuation versus what we settled on.
Right. But the town was part of this as well. It wasn't just
Right, right. I get it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Anyone else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Last, we did a bid for contract transportation for a student with special needs. Said contract, we only had 1 bidder, and the bid came in at $91,728. Based on the needs, we're recommending that contract. But per board policy, anything over $75,000 requires board approval. You'll also see the award of the bid in the consent agenda.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please? Robin? Second. Val? Any questions?
I have a question on that one. Did we have this last year as well for this transportation to this location?
I believe we did. Am I correct on that, Elizabeth, or no?
No, this is a new contract and new location for us.
And Darren or Elizabeth, can we expect reimbursement from the state in some way this year, next year to help cover that expense?
In the normal days, I would say yes, but who knows with what the governor's doing these days. But this would be part of the stack process, and the costs follow the child of what gets submitted to the state.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Darren. Okay, Human Resource Report, Mike.
Thank you. First for your consideration is the certificated staff report. And with that, we still have a couple people in process, but we are fully staffed as far as our teaching staff going into next year. There's a couple support positions we still need to fill, but we are doing well as far as filling the positions this year.
That's great news. Thanks, Mike. May I have a motion, please? I have Pete and Ted. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Second for your consideration is the support staff report, where we have an appointment, a resignation, and 2 retirements. I just want to take a moment. They're both in our maintenance crew, Carl Knapp, who's been with us 22 years, and Donald Kellogg for 24 years. And really the amount of talent that's in that department is amazing. A lot of things you've seen, Carl has built, so we haven't had to purchase. And of course, Donald's been great throughout the year. So just a shout out to both of those outstanding employees.
Sorry to see him go. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I have Pete and Irene. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Special Education Report, Elizabeth.
We have CSE and CPSE recommendations on the consent agenda.
Great, thank you. And Mike, Superintendent's Report.
Thanks, Amy. There's not a need for an executive session this evening. I do have just a brief message that I'd like to share with the community and the board. I'm going to start by stating the obvious that everyone in one way, shape, or form right now is a lot more on edge during this pandemic for a million different reasons. People are elevated, and the most important thing that we can do as a district is to be as transparent and as communicative as possible throughout. To date, we have compiled 40 pages of questions, and we have grouped them in common or like types of questions, and have consolidated them to 13 or 14 pages of Q&As. And I have to just say our school families and our staff have been incredibly receptive to the information we've put out to them so far. The emails that I have received, people have been amazing overall, and I can't share enough my thank you to our staff, even though they're anxious, how polite and willing to do their job. They've been phenomenal. Our parents, even when they may disagree, have understood for the most part our rationale and appreciate our efforts. The amount of emails has been overwhelming. And normally that's a real bad thing. But I can't thank our community enough for how supportive overall they've been throughout this process, and our staff, how supportive they've been. I think it's critical for all of us as leaders to be thoughtful and to be calm during this time of crisis, because we're in a crisis. Especially acknowledging that no matter what we do, there's going to be varying opinions and there's going to be varying perspectives, and there's a significant sense of worry from staff and from families. And I see that, and we all see that in emails or in person. I acknowledge the fact that our communities and staff are looking to us for guidance, and we're doing everything that we can to inform internally and to inform our community. And connected to that concept, we're holding parent forums this Thursday at 12, and we're doing that so that maybe people that are working can use that time during a lunch break. And then again at 6 for those that are working that can come home and tune in and ask questions. And then we're holding a forum for staff in between. We don't have all the answers yet, but we have a caring, compassionate, brilliant set of people that are contributing and trying to find the answers to questions. All of the medical questions that we're receiving related to everything from testing to masks to social distancing to quarantining to you name it. The answer really is our schools, none of us are MDs. None of us have understand fully this pandemic because it's not our profession. So we're relying significantly on our Monroe County Health Department. And I would use this time just to thank Dr. Mendoza and his assistants for regularly being in meetings with us and helping us clarify positions and best practices, and recognizing that what Monroe County Health Department may say may be different than a pediatrician or others, but we have to land somewhere. The one agency that can close us or open us is the health department, and their job is in public health, and so we're relying on them, and their information that's coming out now is becoming much more abundant, and we'll be able to add clarity to a lot of our positions in the next few days. And I just need to end, I think, by thanking the dedication of our teachers, our teacher leaders, our administrators, and our PTSA leaders, to be quite honest, as some of the people I just mentioned haven't had a day off this summer. And to be quite honest, many haven't had a day off since March. The amount of joint problem solving and professional development that's happened over the summer has been impressive beyond belief, and I couldn't be prouder to be part of this organization. We're in a business to help students and to serve our community, and while doing this, we pledge to do this as safely as possible, and at the same time, whatever program children and families are in, is to work through those programs with a sense of integrity by following best practices, if it's remote learning or hybrid or in person. And when I say best practices, I'm thinking things surrounding SEL, equity, curriculum, and other areas. I also feel compelled to share that this year is going to be far from perfect, regardless of the planning, regardless of the preparation. We haven't lived through something like this. We're going to be tested on a lot of different levels, and we're not going to be perfect. But I will tell you this, is that areas that we need to improve, we will continue to improve. And I would just ask for anyone that's listening on the other end, you can really help with constructive feedback along the way, but also being as compassionate as possible during that process. Everyone's lives are different. Every teacher is a human being. Every parent is a human being, and we all have different things going on in our lives. We have different perspectives. We have different things happening personally, and we're going through all of this in the midst of a pandemic. and other significant crises in the world, such as all of the tensions and inequities around race. So where you throw all this in a pot, and it becomes very dangerous. But who we are as a Pittsford community will be defined through how we engage and how we treat one another. And I've just seen so many people committed to doing it the right way. And I've never been happier to be part of this organization. So I want to thank everyone who has reached out, who has given input, who's been polite in their criticism, and for people willing to help and pitch in. So thank you to so many new people I've met through email, and for those that have really given up their summer for the better good of all. I thank you all. That's it. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve, please? I have Renee and I have Pete. And all in favor, sorry.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Old business. Anyone? New business? We have plenty of new business, but anyone want to share their new business? No? Okay. We'll move along. May I have a motion to adjourn? Thanks, Ted and Irene. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, everyone. Be safe, be well.
Thanks, Amy.
Well,
Thanks, Mike.
see you all.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Everyone.